Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. And for the latest episode, myself and Tom Doc Sullivan decided we'd get an early season salmon report from the Drowes and speak to Shane Gallagher about the first fish of the season and how fishing has been in the first few weeks.
Yeah, and we also spoke to Shane a lot more just about the fishing from going back from the effects the lockdowns have had on him over the last couple of years. And very interestingly, into the history of the Lareen estate. And that was a particular interest to me. And he goes back quite a length, explaining, going through the different owners and everything. Also as well, he discusses the blank days, and they're not just a thing of the recent past. And going on the records there's been quite a few blank days, which is good to hear.
Exactly. Kind of gives you hope, maybe. Actually, I thought he was very good, Tom, just on that, wasn't he? Like just talking about kind of, yes, obviously, fish numbers are lower, but at the same time, not to be looking back too much with kind of rose-tinted glasses. He's a firm believer in that. Like, he was very strong on that, I thought. Yeah,
he was really strong on that. I mean, like, because I think we're all kind of guilty of that anyway, Dara. It's like, what is it? The school days were your best days. So, yeah, it's good to hear that, Yeah,
because, make the most of what you have today, I suppose. That's what I'd take from it,
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. But look, it was great to catch up with Shane as always. But before we hear from him, Tom, Corrib has just opened in the last few days. So did you get out, and how's the fishing been?
Right. I actually didn't get out on opening day. I was meant to get out, but then unfortunately I had to go to a funeral, which you can never plan for. So I didn't get out. Now a couple of the buddies were out. It was okay. Best way of putting it. Few lads out fly fishing, 1s and 2s. So nothing disastrous, but nothing brilliant.
What were conditions like?
Conditions, just about manageable that day. It turned cold and started raining. And then, since then, a week after, and it's a bit like what we discussed when we were chatting to Mike, you couldn't have got out. There was one afternoon you could have got out, but like we've had the storms, Eunice and the like. So, it's just really curtailed. So like, as I was saying, if you'd have planned to come down, let's say the Friday after the season opened, you would not have got out. So. Yeah, it is like we were saying, kind of, isn't it? You if you can, take the moments when you can, but, obviously that helps if you're living nearby, Yeah, I mean, that's what we said. I'm very lucky to live close to the lake. But, this time of the year, if you're planning to travel, you're taking a wee bit of a gamble. You really are.
Yeah. Well, sure. Look, fingers crossed that we get some more news maybe in the next episode, just how the fishing has gone. Hopefully it'll pick up, especially conditions wise, in the coming weeks. So look, thanks, Tom. Let's get back to this week's interview with Shane Gallagher for his latest report from the Drowes, as we hear about the opening few weeks on the river.
Yeah, I suppose it was an earlier start this year than we've had the previous few seasons. We had the first fish caught on the 13th of January. So that was the first January fish since 2018. So it's a positive start. We've had 4 fish in January. We've had 3 in February. The latest just about an hour and a half ago landed. So yeah, it's a good start. Yeah,
good timing.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Tell us about that fish.
Yeah, please.
A guy, basically, he's staying with us tonight. Himself and his friend Connor and Aidan. So. Connor Burke was just getting tackled up in the van. He just pulled up on the river at the old sea pool down near the mouth of the river, and Aidan, third cast, got stuck into a fish, nice fish, about 7 pounds. The tide was in at full in at 2:30, so I'd say it was just tide fresh in,
Wow,
he got on a yellow flying sea. Yeah,
hot off the press, literally.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Well, I was just doing the school run and I got a phone call to say somebody's got a fish, so had to open up a bottle of whiskey and give him a quick half one to settle his nerves.
Oh, yeah. I'd say he needed it.
Absolutely, yeah.
It must be great actually, because it's interesting that you're saying that, Shane. Like, because obviously, life goes on. You have to run the fishery, but like you said, you're doing the school run, you have family stuff, and like, so anytime a salmon is caught, are you literally pinged the message like?
Well, it was Bill was up there in the shop, so he just gave me a ring. So. Definitely for springers. We mightn't open a bottle of whiskey for grills now, but for springers in January or February, definitely, I think they deserve a half one.
Brilliant. Oh, God, yeah. I'm sure at a push now for grills. If you were pushed now, you just might open it.
Well, maybe if it's somebody's first one.
Yeah, good. That's good to hear.
And come here, tell us, Shane, what was New Year's Day like? Because it was your first opening on the Drowes since the pandemic.
Well, we had an opening day in 2020 as normal. The lockdown didn't come in until March, about mid-March, around St. Patrick's Day. So last year then, we didn't really have an opening day. If you remember, the lockdown came in after Christmas. Yep. So 2021 season, basically, it was it didn't start as normal at all. So it was great then this year to be fully back to normal. We had about 80 anglers out on opening day on the 1st of January. It was probably the mildest opening day that I ever remember for 1st of January. We were going around in shirt sleeves. We actually let the fire go out. And normally you'd be huddled around the stove in the tackle shop on a New Year's morning. But I think it was about 14 degrees at one stage. Conditions were good. Water levels were low, if anything. It got very stormy then later in the day, which wasn't ideal for fly fishing. But I think just everybody was delighted to be out. A lot of people hadn't really fished since the 2019 season. So people were glad to be back on the riverbank. Just they had maybe some new gear that they wanted to try out and just talk to friends again, and just sort of a return to normality, really.
Yeah, I was going to say that there was a kind of a sense nearly of it, was that kind of things are getting back to normal. The Drowes is open on January the 1st. Things are getting back to normal.
It's just a good sign, at the very first day of the year, the very first day of the season. And, it was pretty uncertain right up until we got to go ahead for opening day, because pre-Christmas, people were afraid that there was going to be a repeat of 2021, that cases would surge, but that didn't materialize, and I think there was just relief all around.
I actually just wanted to touch on that for a sec, Tom and Shane. Just what's it like running a fishery? Because you're at the whim of obviously, okay, pandemic is a once in a century or once in a generation thing like that, but you're at the whim is a bit like, I suppose, a lot of farmers were talking about foot and mouth, in terms of you're told to shut down and that's it. And when you're so dependent on, people coming, was it a very stressful time for you as a fishery owner? Was it the first time you'd kind of experienced something like this?
Well, I suppose we're used to uncertainty in angling. I just was down here in the office. I was looking at, my family took over the fishery in 1978, and I just found a trout and salmon from November 1978, and there's a whole article about the need for a complete ban on all methods of fishing for salmon in Ireland. So that there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. So
when you say all methods, you mean all legal methods, or are we talking rod and line?
Rod and line. I'll just read out the first bit. An immediate ban must be imposed on all methods of capturing salmon, including angling, until such time as Ireland's salmon-bearing rivers have again reached a self-sustaining stock level. So that's November 1978.
That's 44 years ago.
And actually, sorry, just on that, Shane, when did your dad buy the fishery?
So he bought the fishery in September 1977, and then our first opening day was 1st of January 1978. Yeah.
He bought it in 1977. Who did he buy it from, actually, Shane?
He bought it off a guy called Hugh Tunney, who was a meat baron. He would have been well known. He owned Classybawn Castle, which was the Mountbatten Castle in Mullaghmore.
Oh yeah. How long had he owned it?
I think he only had it for maybe 5 years at the most. He bought it off another family called the Ormonds, who were an English family. And then it had a series of owners before that. There was a Hamilton family who had a hotel in Bundoran that owned it for maybe 30 years. So originally, it was the estate was put together by a guy called Luke White, who he lived in Luttrellstown Castle in Dublin. And he was a self-made man. He arrived penniless into Dublin, I think from the Isle of Man or Scotland. I'm not 100% sure which. And he started selling second-hand newspapers, day-old newspapers. And then he started trading in second-hand books. And then during the time of the Napoleonic Wars, he was able to loan the British government money at high interest rates, and he made an absolute fortune. So he bought Luttrellstown Castle, and he started acquiring shooting and fishing rights in the area.
I remember doing this.
Second-hand newspapers.
Yeah.
Second-hand newspapers, yeah.
But isn't it incredible? Because I remember, Tom, I was doing this documentary years ago with Shane on this, and he was telling me the history of this. And because, like it's fascinating to think about, isn't it? Because obviously people couldn't afford the newspapers at the time, and news traveled so slowly back then, that you were willing to pay a penny or whatever it was to get last week's news because it didn't make any difference. Like, imagine trying to get away with that in the internet day. Like,
God, yeah.
I suppose back in the 1800s, if you were reading a day or even a week old newspaper, it was still news to you because you hadn't heard it. So
yeah.
And supposedly, actually, just on the Napoleonic thing, supposedly it was was it the Rothschilds or one of those banking families that how they made their money. Exactly, that they found out what was the result of it first, and were able to make money off the back of it before news reached England. What was going on?
Wow. Day old news and up to the hour news could make money for you in different circumstances.
Just like it's kind of okay. We might be working in nanoseconds these days, but it's the same principle, isn't it? In the sense of
it's the exact same principle. Yeah. Really, it is. Just a matter of time. It's just timing. Or let's solve. Yeah.
Nice segue into fishing.
Yeah.
The running. But
you should have been here yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
But actually, I remember on that, Shane, I remember you showing me the old record books, and because we were talking about days gone by, and you were showing me like kind of weeks going, no fish, terrible conditions. It was like something that you'd hear a conversation nowadays. Like.
Yeah, like I think we tend to look back in the past as through rose-tinted glasses, and the old saying, nostalgia isn't what it used to be, but you never remember the blank days. You just remember what stands out is, I got this fish and on X day, and that's how your memories work. You might have had 20 blank days before that, but you don't recall them. And when you're telling the stories to the next generation or another angler, that's what you recall, and that's what becomes our representation of the past. And I think there's just been many blank days, right down through the history of angling. I'm sure, like people always talk about, the golden area, the golden era, but in Scotland, I know the peak year for any catches of salmon by angling was 2010, which is only 12 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's very funny. I have a book here up there somewhere. Loch fishing, as in LOCH, Scottish locks, written by Hamish Stewart in 1900. And he opens, the first line in it is, there is no doubt in my mind that the fishing on Loch Tay was far superior 30 years ago than it is today. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a familiar story.
Yeah. It's always better then. Actually, I just want to ask you, just kind of because while we were talking about the ban on fishing and stuff, or sorry, it wasn't the ban on fishing, it was a ban on travel, obviously during the pandemic. But do you remember foot and mouth?
I do indeed, yeah.
So was there similarities, did you see, from as a fishery owner, like compared to then to the pandemic time? Yeah,
like we were lucky ourselves during foot and mouth that we were able to stay open for the first mile of the fishery because it was through our own land. So, and our cattle were not out in the fields. It was in the early spring part of the year, and normally in this part of the country anyways, the cattle wouldn't be out of their sheds until
they were housed.
Maybe so could be as late as April before you're putting cattle out. So we were able to, when we did have to put cattle out, then put them away from the river so anglers could they had a mile of fishing basically, so we weren't as badly affected with foot and mouth as the pandemic really.
And literally, like, for the pandemic, like, did you find yourself kind of, what am I doing with myself? Kind of, the kids are driving me nuts. You're forced to stay at home, whereas you're used to being out in the fishery. Being so busy running it, being outdoors. Did you find it hard to cope with that kind of having to stay there? Like,
to be honest, not really. I just made the most of it, and I think everybody was in the same boat, not just in Ireland, but right around the world. And it was just, you just adapt. To be honest, if you're going to experience a pandemic, doing it on the banks of a river or near Loch Melvin, and with the sea just a few miles away, we were very fortunate. Really, If you remember, the weather was absolutely fantastic at the first lockdown. So, we were out with the kids. We had walked along the riverbank, seen things, together, experienced things. We made the most of it, really. And, probably we have a lot of happy memories from it in some ways, because it was an opportunity to spend time with the kids. They were off school. I was off work. That hopefully we'll never have again. But certainly at the time, it was. It's nice to make the most of that opportunity.
Did you get to fish much?
Yeah, we have a good pool here out in front of the house. And, normally, when there's maybe a paying guest coming down, you start to reel in when you see somebody coming. So it was great to have the opportunity to fish.
Reeling in.
Those damn guests.
Damn.
Oh yeah, so we had some funny times. Like we had one of the kids caught some of their first fish, and one of them caught their first bat as well one evening. So we had good fun. Yeah.
I remember, Tom, actually, you were telling me, because I remember talking to you at the time, and you were saying it was just kind of so surreal kind of around the area. Was it like for you, like that it was just so quiet, that you'd normally have seen somebody, say Mayfly time, you would have seen anglers around, boats out, and it was only really I
think the first lockdown, first May 2020, my experience was that, on a May evening when it was getting dark, looking over at the Carrick Road, which I can see from my side, no cars. And like the place would always be bustling with cars going back and over, and guys going off for something to eat. And yeah, it was just quiet. The lake was quiet. Well, the lake wasn't completely quiet because the locals could fish. Okay, so during the day there'd be a couple of boats out. I don't know. Did you have many? You'd have had a couple of locals that were able to fish with you as well.
Yeah, I suppose the first lockdown wasn't as restrictive as what we had last year in 2020. If you remember, there was a 2-kilometer limit in the early part, and that was very restrictive. So once it went to 5 kilometers, then that gave a little bit more scope to people.
Yeah, because we saw that there. A lot of locals, a lot of people that live beside the lake, they utilize it, should we say? But there was that strange feeling of it just been so quiet. I mean, leaving aside the fishing, going out of an evening time and just looking over the road and no noise, just no noise. Yeah. It was nice, and it's very interesting that you say that, Shane. Looking back and looking on the nice part of it, there was a lot. There was a lot of good things that we could take from it.
Yeah, and I like that's I 100%. Obviously, it was horrendous, the death, the toll on society and people.
It's true. Yeah.
But there is a silver cloud to it in the sense of, I think, and I'm wondering if you see this, Shane, in terms of the fishery like that. We're hearing this anecdotally in terms of the interest in fishing and nature generally has been, revitalized, re-energized. Are you seeing any of that from your end?
I thought I'd see more of it, to be honest with you. And if you look at participation levels in 2020, from what we can ascertain, say, from license sales, I know in the UK and Denmark, they're up maybe 20-25%. I don't think we've seen that really in Ireland, certainly not in salmon fishing. Maybe we will see it in future, in the seasons to come. But at the moment, I don't think we really have seen it. People are certainly getting out in nature and enjoying it and appreciating the environment, which is great. And maybe that will help awareness for, the importance of protecting what we have and biodiversity and salmon habitat and everything. But as regards participation in angling, I don't really see it just yet.
I wonder, is it a longer term play? Like you say, it's something that'll just kind of subsume into, kind of subconsciousness that, we like nature, and that slowly people who mightn't have been into it as much are slowly kind of maybe deciding, I'm going to change my lifestyle or, appreciate things a bit more. Or the flip side of it is we just go back to normal, where our normal begrudging selves giving out curmudgeonly going, and then, it's back to normality.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But certainly, people don't tend to get involved in angling by themselves. Normally they're introduced by a family member, or somebody will bring you fishing, and there's some entry, some connection, and I think that really needs to be nurtured. Like we had a strategy there for angling development, and I think there was great goals set for an increased participation. But even before the pandemic, we haven't really seen the benefits of that just yet.
It's interesting.
That's interesting. That's really, it's really interesting that.
But actually, I think you raise a good point there, though, Shane, and I think it's probably maybe overlooked a lot of times, is the fact that, it's normally somebody who gets you involved, like a family member, neighbor, friend.
Yeah.
And like, I think it'd be, because I know myself, like when I was an uncle at the time when I was younger who introduced me to course fishing as a kid. And that instilled a love for me in fishing and the outdoors. And subsequently then when I moved down to Tipperary and I took up fly fishing. But the really difficult thing I found was I didn't have anybody. So I found I was, flailing around on the river, and you know yourself, you hear the stories when you're trying to do it on your own, it takes 10 times as long. And any frustrations and, your question is, am I doing this right? What am I doing? It's a lot harder. Whereas if you had like a mentor scheme, or I don't know, like, I just think what you said is interesting, Shane. Like, it kind of you'd love to see something like that where you kind of nearly buddy up with somebody, that
like bring a friend fishing day or something like that,
Yeah, very much so. That's a very good one. I've often thought of something like that because we need to sometimes go beyond the traditional, as you said, family member or friend or close relative. We need to get people back into it.
Yeah,
no, I think you're dead right. Like, it'd be nice to see some kind of formal initiative or something, around that.
I know, there's angling clubs around here, say on the lake and things like that, and the average age of members is definitely, it's quite elderly now. So I don't think young people are becoming involved, certainly in my experience, in fishing clubs as much as they used to. I think the same is true of a lot of clubs, like tennis clubs, golf clubs, organized sport, organized things like that. People aren't maybe as inclined to get involved.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and we touched on this in the last episode.
That's what we did, actually. Yeah, it's interesting. I was having deja vu there, Shane. Because
there's a lot of, like we said, there's a lot of other options for kids, people, whatever, whether it's computer games, internet, whatever, Netflix. But yet the flip side of it is, I think it's really interesting. You've never had as much options, because, like you said, if you wanted to join tennis club, golf club, canoeing, whatever you want to do, I'm sure it's all there. Like mountain bike, So maybe that's part of the problem as well, that there is so many options.
Like if you think about it, surfing has only been in Ireland.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
in a generation or two generations, like probably maybe late 60s, early 70s. I think down in Rossnala, the Britton brothers were probably the first people surfing here, and now it's absolutely exploded. It's great to see it, and it's great that people are getting out. But obviously, it's going to compete as an activity with other things, probably there's not as much mystery maybe involved about getting a surfboard and catching a wave as there is getting a rod and catching a fish.
But you know what? Actually, it's really interesting. Actually, you brought up the surfing one, because why I think surfing is of interest, there's a culture, there's a subset there to it. So you're buying into this kind of surfing culture, dude. The waves.
There's a culture to fishing too, and it's definitely not surfing, dude.
But that's the problem. That's the problem. But yet you contrast it though to America, where like the steelhead culture, to me is a bit like the snowboarding, surfing. In the summer you go surfing.
There's a cool element to it, and I think the same is in Australia and New Zealand. We don't seem to have that in Ireland as well. And I think maybe there's, it's not as an attractive proposition, and maybe there's a bit of elitism involved, and there's people are a little bit maybe afraid to try it out in some ways, whereas other sports like surfing, for example, are very, very accessible.
And that's a key word, actually. It's accessibility. And again, I think of my kids. My boys are 9, 7, and Gloria is 4. So they're aware of fishing, but only through me. So, if they didn't have that, how would they get into it? But then likewise, like we go down to West Cork for holidays during the summer. There's surf camps. Yeah. So they'll get into that. There's swimming camps. There's all that. There's not a fishing camp.
No.
But why not? Like, maybe that's something that needs to be, again, what needs to be done proactively and in a formalized structure.
Yeah. And there's another element as well, that this year, for example, the price of a one-day license and a 21-day license was increased. The one-day license increased by 80% from from €20 to €36. So there's a barrier to entry there. If you're considering maybe trying salmon fishing for one day or surfing for one day, immediately if you want to surf for one day or even half a day, you have to pay €36.
Yeah.
So like on one hand, like there was millions spent on the strategy for angling development and with a view to increasing participation. And then 2 years after a pandemic where participation levels are at an all-time low, we got an 80% price increase in licenses.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to
part of my own view on that, and I'll probably get pillory, but I actually think the one-day license should be free.
Yeah.
I really do. I do, yeah, to encourage, because, you know, serious salmon fishermen are going to get more than a one-day one.
Absolutely, yeah. But a taster or one day would be just to introduce people to that.
Well, wouldn't the danger with that system be abused? I'm just going for one day. I'm just going for one day.
No. But, you know, one day, Tom Sullivan, F12, my postcode, I'm only entitled to one day per year, per annum.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I'll have another one day there, please.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure about salmon fishing yet. I think I might like it.
I'll try it again. Yeah. I'll keep trying until I catch.
Yeah.
It's like the complimentary drink. I'm not sure if I like it yet, you know?
Yeah. Maybe I'll try it with Red Bull next.
It's an interesting tangent we went off on there, but I know you're very, very involved, Shane, in terms of kind of the wider tourism initiative and trying to get people involved, you know, in the outdoors, and you know, whether it's kind of offering them, you know, fishing on one hand, and then there's all other things people can do, isn't it? It's You're trying to, I suppose, include fishing within that wider kind of perspective of it, like.
Well, I suppose where I would see the fishery and see myself as being very much a part of the local community. And like when my family started the fishery and developed some holiday homes in the late 1970s and 1980s, very few people were coming to the northwest of Ireland. You had very, very poor roads. It was probably maybe a 4 or 5 hour journey from Dublin Airport. Dublin Airport was the only access point, really convenient. Flights were expensive. You had the troubles in Northern Ireland. So it was a difficult proposition. So for an area in the northwest of Ireland where, you know, it was a fairly deprived area, really, not much employment, tourism was something that was very, very beneficial for the area. So a lot of foreign anglers, back in the day, the early days, a lot of Germans come in, French and Swiss as well. And that was a huge boon for the area, for local shops, restaurants. And you know, the value of that, I think, then for tourism is it's an important element for the whole community, not just for the fishery itself. You know.
No, I could see that up there where you are, Shane. It's huge for the whole community. Huge community. And it's interesting you say that, because obviously you would have been bringing, when you started as the family with the holiday homes, you'd been bringing anglers in all throughout the season. And yet in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, oh, the Drowes, it's early season. But sure, obviously there's fishing there throughout, you know, you have a grilled run as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a 9-month season, you know. So yeah.
Is it? Yeah, 9 months. Yeah. When does the grilled run start there?
Normally the peak time for grills would be June and July. So that would be
Is that your busiest time of year, Shane?
Well, traditionally, you could set your clock to grills. It's becoming a little bit more sort of weather dependent or water dependent now. But yeah, June and July, like, they're busy times for, I suppose, they coincide with a lot of people's holidays as well, and schools are off. Yeah. So they'd be busy times, absolutely, yeah.
Kabir, do you have a back end run? Is there a later run at the end of August, September?
August is normally the quietest month for fishing, like, you know. The grills run is normally over. September, you can get a run of fish. But what I did notice about 2020 was, if you remember, during when the lockdown came in March, we had about, maybe it seemed like 6 weeks of glorious sunshine. Mm-hmm. So the weather was extremely, extremely good, but water levels were very low. One part of me was saying, if you were going to pick a time when no anglers were going to be allowed to travel, a time when I actually walked up the bed of the river, a couple of pools up from a pool called the Crooked Hole, and it was just bedrock. Yeah. So I had never seen it so early in springtime. But then when the restrictions were lifted about mid-May, we got some heavy rain, and I've never seen such a prolific and prolonged run of grilse, not since maybe the mid 90s.
Yeah.
In
as soon as that rain came in around mid-May.
And not just for June and July, but into August, which was unusual, and right until the end of the season. Like I remember bailing a boat for a guy on the last day of the season, and watching fresh grilse coming in off our slipway into Melbourne.
I remember though talking, Shane, like a lot of people were saying that year, wasn't it, the runs that they were seeing of the fish, like, and they were wondering, was it that there was just less going on in terms of less people out? But even like maybe, what was going on in the oceans in terms of transport, whatever was going on, there was just, the way society had shut down, had that then allowed the fish to recover or come back? Like,
you hear all sorts of anecdotes or whatever. I'm not really sure what the reason for it was, but it was certainly a real phenomenon that there was a hugely increased run, not just with us, but in other fisheries, and we're talking to other people as well that they witnessed it,
Yeah.
Just to bring it then, Shane, I know in terms of like looking ahead to the year to come, like are you hopeful for another good year, that this is a chance for people to get back out and the enthusiasm will be there and that the runs will hold up?
Like I think people have used the lockdown to sort of reevaluate their priorities and think that they want to make an effort to spend more time on the riverbank or out in a boat or on the lake. So even already, like we're seeing an increase in bookings and a lot more inquiries. So I think it's going to be a busy year. I think people are like coiled springs. They want to get out there, and they want to get back on the water and meet up with friends and family again and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry there, Darry. You said that because this is the first January you've had a fish since 2018.
That's right. Yeah.
So would you be sort of thinking then now that hopefully it's going to be a good year, or is that that's a blip, or not, or an up and a down, or would you say no? Yeah. Hopefully this is going to be good.
I wouldn't read too much into it, Tom, to be honest with
you.
Okay,
cool.
One swallow doesn't make a summer, and
fair enough.
One springer doesn't make a season. So
make a man's day though.
Yeah, absolutely, you certainly can. Yeah.
Or woman.
No, it's great. But we'd certainly be hopeful that there'd be some good spring fishing and again, like that there'd be decent water levels and good fishing conditions throughout the season.
Yeah.
And you would advise then, maybe, Shane, anyone listening that hasn't tried the Drowes, or even fancies picking up a rod, having a go at salmon, would you advise them maybe come in June, July? Is that the kind of best time for them?
I suppose for spring fishing, the peak time would normally be from about mid-March until mid-May. That's when you'd see bigger numbers of spring fish. Like it's fishing is what it is. It's like I had shortly after the first salmon was caught this year, I had an email from two German brothers, and they said they were going to hop on a plane and come over and catch a salmon, and how many could they catch today? So I just sent them an email saying it's not that easy.
No problem.
Many people are going to fish without catching anything. So I didn't get any email back from them, but they didn't arrive. But you have to temper people's expectations, and I think you have to be honest with people. And it's you're going to have lots of difficult fishing days, and I think maybe the days when you do land a spring fish or land your first fish, that makes it all worthwhile. And I also think maybe that's one reason that participation levels and younger people aren't getting involved in angling as much, is because that whole concept of not instant gratification or having to put in time before you reward it. It's a difficult concept to grasp. I think nowadays, with everything is instant, you have to be rewarded for your effort immediately, and that's just not how fishing works, and it's certainly not how spring salmon fishing works.
You know what? I think it's a brilliant analogy to talk about that the instant gratification. They talk about, like, I know even in the media, like the slow news. There's like a movement behind slow news, and it's about longer stories. You delve deeper into stuff so that it's not just instant.
140 characters.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like as if we're being. Well, it has been shown that we have been trained now. Like our attention span has dropped, and like literally we've become conditioned to a certain way. And there is, but I think that's so true, and it's the reason why people who do get into fishing, isn't it? That it's just that chance to switch off, even if it's for that couple of hours. That's you're not thinking of the phone, you're not thinking of the time. All you're concentrating on is the water and your fly in front, like, and that's the
Absolutely,
key to it.
yeah. Like I've been talking to different people fishing this year, and at the end of the day, seeing how the day went, or did they see any fish, and often people would say to you, I didn't see a fish, but it was great to be out, and you get the feeling they're just saying that to be nice, or bonus. But I genuinely think that this year there's people mean that. People are glad to be out. People maybe are more appreciative that they can get out, and that we're back to a situation where we can get on the riverbank, and we can fish, and it's just that appreciation again.
And I think as well as it's what I love in it, whether it's the Drowes or any of these places around Ireland, and it's a chance to visit different parts of Ireland that you wouldn't have gone to. And a lot of these places, they're very evocative. They're steeped in history, the landscape. That's all part of the experience. Like the Four Masters Bridge. You might just explain the Four Masters Bridge there, Shane.
Yeah, so the Four Masters Bridge is about a mile downstream from the lake, and there's originally it was called Mullinelec Bridge. Mullinelec is it's the townland there is called it's the Mill of the Flagstones, and those mills are where my family had the sawmills, and previously a flax mills and a corn mill. So the Four Masters were they were Franciscan friars, and there was a lot of controversy about. They wrote a history of Ireland called the Annals of the Kingdom of Ireland, or the Annals of the Four Masters.
And all the kettle wash there, yeah.
The local school is called the Four Masters School, so they're well remembered in the area. But there was a lot of controversy about where the annals were actually written. So the Franciscans had an abbey in Donegal town, but during the writings they described their location as Egg Drowes. So at the Drowes. So and then there's a townland just at the where the river flows out of Loch Melvin called Ross Friar. So the point of the friars. So there was a lot of speculation. I think back in the 1960s or 70s there was it would be the equivalent of a Twitter war now, but it was done through the pages of the Irish Times about where the location of the friars' house on the Drowes was. So eventually, anyways, it was concluded that it was either in a place called Maharacar outside of Bundoran near the mouth of the river, or else in Ross Friar at the beginning of the Drowes. So they put up a monument. It was unveiled in 1974 by Kerbal O'Dolly, the then president, and the bridge was renamed from Mullinelec Bridge to the Four Masters Bridge.
Oh, Four Masters.
Four Masters Bridge. Yeah, so it's an important. I think they recorded history from the Great Flood, which
they did. Yeah,
it's very water was very high that year. But so I think 2,000 years of Irish history was recorded along the banks of the river, and it's the most important document that we have for a lot of ancient Irish history.
Brilliant.
No, that's really good. I often wondered about that, why it was called the Four Masters Bridge. I didn't know that it was tied in so close to locally there. I won't get into the argument whether it was Ross Friar or Maharac. So obviously it was just in that locality there, because I've driven over that bridge and I often wondered. Yeah.
So there were some repairs into it there recently. We had a big flood here about 4 years ago, and it was the bridge was quite damaged, so it had to be repaired. It was closed for about 6 months.
I encourage people just do a Google search Four Masters Bridge. You'll see the picture, and it'll entice you. It'll whet the appetite. The next thing you'll have to do is go in person, like.
Yeah. And the bridge itself then was actually blown up in the Civil War in 1922.
Yeah. And
my grandfather he didn't blow up the bridge now, but he lived beside it while it was blown up. Yeah. And because the country was being reconstructed, and the rubble of the bridge was in the river for about 2 years, and he noticed that just outside his house was a great salmon pool. So then when my dad took over the fishery, he had heard the story from my grandfather, so he recreated the conditions of the pool, which is now the mill pool.
Not by blowing up the bridge, I hope.
No, he brought in some stone from elsewhere.
And so that's how the mill pool is still there now to this day.
That's what.
Wow. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, look, I'd highly encourage anybody listening to get a taste of the Drowes this year in 2022. There's no excuse to be out and about, and either spring fishing or grouse run, whatever it takes your fancy. But do have a go and soak up some of the history while you're at it as well. Check out the mill pool and the Four Masters Bridge. Shane Gallagher, continued success for 2022 and beyond. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you, Darragh. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tom.
So our thanks to Shane Gallagher for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
And you might even hear from Shane Gallagher as well. Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com, as well as on Instagram. And myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.